there's only so far carburetor cleaner and a toothbrush can take you. So I went ahead and bought an ultrasonic cleaner to see how well it does and if it cleans parts better than just the old-fashioned manual way of doing it. And I'll show you some tips that I learned along the way. So if you watch the last carburetor teardown video that I did a few weeks ago on a really crusty 1406, I needed something that was a lot more aggressive and could clean a little bit better in those small passages and small little areas on that carburetor. Like I said, carburetor cleaner and a toothbrush did okay, but I had no confidence that it was going to get in and clean those passages well. So I went ahead and bought this ONEZILI Ultrasonic 10-liter cleaner. It's got a 300-watt heater with it, and it's 240-watt ultrasonic transducer cleaner that kind of creates the water agitation in there. So I wanted one. I didn't want to spend more than about $200, to be honest with you, on the ultrasonic cleaner, and all in at like $250 with the cleaner and solution at best. And that's what this got me. Now, this is a 10-liter unit. It is about perfect for doing half of an Edelbrock carburetor at a time. It'll do the bottom side, or it will do the top side and a lot of the boosters and maybe a basket of small parts to go along with it. So you need really 2 cleaning cycles to do it. But again, I just didn't want to spend more than that $250 all in, and I figured I'd give this a try. So I'm going to try some of some different cleaners in here to just see what works best, but we'll talk about that here in just a second. So I'm going to jump right in here and give you some pros and cons of this particular unit. Now, all these cheaper ultrasonic units on Amazon, I think they're probably pretty close to being the same. So don't quote me on that, but just by having my hands on a different brand that another friend had, and then this brand that I have, they're pretty similar. So again, the biggest pros of this is it's right at $200. I think it was $208. 209, something like that. So it was really right at that $200 mark that I wanted. These cleaners have multiple sizes in it. So I've got the 10-liter one for myself, and it does okay, I guess, for the carburetor. I do, like I said, have to run it in 2 cycles, but for what I need and the parts that I'm going to clean with it, it's perfect. Now they've got smaller ones, much smaller ones, and they've got ones that are up to, I think, 20 liters of fluid. So maybe more, maybe 30 is the biggest one. Another pro is all the cleaning solutions, at least that I've seen, can be bought locally. Now, local hardware stores, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, whatever, have some sort of industrial type cleaner on the shelf. Now, it's typically a ZEP product, or an off-brand, house brand cleaner, but I've tried a couple of different ones and they seem to work okay. Now, another pro to this thing is it's very simple to operate. It's not complicated at all. You set the temperature and let it warm up to that temperature. You throw the parts in, you set the time, and walk away from it. When you're done, you come back, hot wash them off, and you're done, essentially. It's very, very simple. So there's a lot of pros to this. Another pro is it's benchtop friendly. It's small enough and it's easy to store, I guess, when it's not in use, but it's nice to set on a benchtop, kind of do all the work you need to do, especially if you're working with something small, really like a carburetor. It doesn't take up a lot of space and it doesn't take a lot of time to run it. So that's definitely a pro with a smaller unit. Now let's talk about the cons to this, because there are a few of them. Now, this machine is cheap only because it has one transducer, and what the transducer is it what generates that frequency in the water that creates the movement for the cleaning. And it's very obvious to me now that I own one why the professional machines are so much more expensive. It's because they have more transducers. The water moves at a much greater rate than it does with this one. Now, it does have a little bit of movement to it. It does operate, but really, if you're really going to get into those hard-to-clean passages or want a lot of fluid movement in the carburetor or whatever it is you're cleaning, absolutely, that's the reason why the more expensive units are the way they are. Those transducers are what does the heavy lifting of the work. Another thing that I noticed with this one is sometimes the heat spikes. It really doesn't really matter. I've set it as low as 30 degrees Celsius all the way up to 50 degrees Celsius. And I think what happens is whatever parts you put in there, the more you put in there, the more that they soak the heat. and it tends to radiate a little bit, perhaps, I'm just guessing here, and the heat tends to spike. So it doesn't hold the heat and maintain it when you set it at, say, 50 degrees Celsius. It doesn't hold it there. It just will get it to that operating temperature, and if it drops below it, it'll continue to heat. But it did spike quite a bit, and that could be an issue depending on what type of material you're putting in there. Now, I guess the biggest con here is I should have bought a bigger unit. This 10-liter one does, like I said, about half a carburetor at a time, and that's fine. I'm not complaining about it, but honestly, I probably should have gone ahead and bought the 20-liter. Now, it was $350, $360, something like that. I'll leave links down to all of them in the description so you can check out whatever the current price is on it, but I think the 20-liter would save me some time, and time is a big deal. I can make more money. I can't create more time. So the 20-liter would allow me to have done one whole carburetor, everything, all the pieces, and have them spread out enough to where it would clean effectively. Now, what I don't know is with that bigger 20-liter unit is if it comes with a bigger or two transducers, whereas the 10-liter only has one. So not a deal breaker, but it would have been a time saver. The 10-liter is fine. The other last con I think I have with it is it's sort of noisy. Now, I've been around these before, and I think maybe the bigger, more professional units that maybe have some insulation in them or, something to kind of keep the noise reduced down, that it could possibly be. I don't know enough about the industrial units to know, but because this doesn't have anything in it, that transducer, as it's vibrating at the bottom of the cleaner, it certainly has a lot of frequency that sends through the metal body, and it's not horrible, but it's certainly noticeable, and it's loud enough that if you were standing right next to it trying to have a conversation with somebody, you would have to raise your voice a little bit to be heard. So it's not horrible, but certainly something to keep in mind.
So yeah, when they said that thing's noisy, they weren't lying. I'm probably 6 inches away from the camera. Normal tone, normal loudness, I guess, in my voice, and yeah, that thing's pretty deafening right down here by it. But it's not bad when you get away from it. It's a little noisy, but not too bad. I'll pull away and so you can hear it. Yeah, it gets a little bit better when you get a little further away from it, but it is certainly noisy. And that water's getting dirty. So, got about 11 minutes left here, so we'll let her go. See how it turns out.
Now I'll share with you a couple of tips of things that I learned along the way. And I think the biggest one here for me is to keep the heat below 50 degrees Celsius. And the reason being is the higher the temperature you set it at, the more that it tends to spike depending on how much material that you're trying to clean. And I'll explain that. When I had it set at 50 on this carburetor, just an aluminum-bodied carburetor, that heater spiked all the way up to 58. Now, that's not horrible in this situation because it's an all-metal piece that was in there, but if you were trying to clean plastic or maybe a little bit more sensitive jewelry or something in there that was a little more sensitive to the heat, then that could be an issue. So for me on a carburetor, I didn't try it any hotter than 50, and I don't think that I will. I think it was about right, but it does spike up quite a bit. And like I had mentioned earlier, the heating unit in there doesn't control the heat or hold it at a certain temperature. It will heat it to that point, and then if it fluctuates from there, the heater unit will warm it if it needs to. But if it spikes up, that's where it's going to be. So the other thing too with that is when you are putting the cleaner in, put the hottest water that you can put into there. Now, if you have to get it boiling off the stovetop in a saucepan or whatever and dump it in there, that may be a little overkill. But if you put cold water in there, this thing takes forever to heat up. So give it a little bit of a little help and put the hottest water you can in there. Because as soon as you pour the cleaner in there, it's typically at a cooler temperature. At least it was in my garage, and it's going to cool the hot water down anyway. So put some hot solution in there, water in there. It'll help you out. also too, with the different cleaners that I used, and it was mostly off the shelf stuff, it was a mixture. It was water and it was a little bit of the cleaner, or quite a bit of the cleaner. I think I was using half a gallon, and that was a fairly stout mixture. Most of the time people are calling for cups of the cleaner with a 10-liter unit, but I just didn't feel it was going to clean enough, and the early tests that I did on it kind of proved that out. The other thing is, and it's the old, adage that people love, Dawn dish soap, dishwashing liquid, is absolutely a couple of big, heavy, liberal squirts of that into that cleaner, along with the cleaning solution in the water, will help. It will help carry away the garbage away from it. Does a really good job of breaking up the oil and grease and nasty stuff. So a little bit of shot of Dawn dishwashing detergent in there works well. But the other side of that is the time. Now, I tried the carburetor on 3 different 15-minute cycles just to see, how dirty the water was getting, how well it was cleaning, what I needed to do to prep the part a little bit better going in. And I think 15 minutes maybe for me, maybe the high side of it. Now, if you had some really, really, really nasty stuff, then I guess you could probably go to 30 minutes with it. But the only issue that I have with that is the temperature tends to change quite aggressively at 30. And if you have, like I mentioned, anything that's sensitive to the heat, run it for shorter periods of time. That way you can kind of keep the liquid of the control of the liquid temperature. And that's a big part of it. Now, the Edelbrock carburetor on the top side, the accelerator pump is attached to that, and it has got some plastic pieces in there. And I had to be a little careful of that material in there, just so the cleaner is one issue, but the heat plus the cleaner is important. So make sure you do your homework before you put any parts in there. The other thing is small parts. If you have really small parts, and I mean screws, any of the not really the boosters, but any of the hardware that came off the carburetor, the idle mixture screws, springs, the squirter assembly, all that stuff is small parts, and it will not go in the basket that they gave you. So you will need another smaller basket to put it in there, and that will help keep them contained, but keep them in a situation where you can use the parts cleaner to clean it. And what I used is just another small little basket that I got out of one of the tins or the pails that you get at an auto parts store that has carburetor cleaner in it. You can use a small basket that's in there. But here's the issue with that, is when you put another piece of material in there, and one that is a little more enclosed like that basket is, the less of the water frequency and movement is going to get in there. So it's going to be a little less effective because that motion of the fluid doesn't really reach into there that well. So I would probably clean anything that goes into that little basket a little bit better, and then just hope that the hot water and the cleaning solution will help clean the rest of it, type of thing. So that's just a little tip on some of the things that you can do to make this thing a little bit more effective. So I guess what it boils down to is, was this purchase worth it? And I think yes. Carburetors are kind of a complicated little piece of equipment, even though they are very analog, they are very old. The technology isn't that great in them, but there are passages, especially when you get into the main metering passage, into the accelerator pump passages. Doesn't matter what brand or flavor carburetor you're talking about here, Quadrajet, Holley, Edelbrock, doesn't really matter. They all are unique in that aspect. And I think having a little bit better cleaner to help clean those carburetors more efficiently certainly would be better. Now, if you're doing bigger parts like valves or connecting rods or something will fit into the cleaner that doesn't have all those, then yeah, you're just trying to cut the grease, you're just trying to cut the nastiness off of it and save yourself a little bit of scrubbing time with a wire brush and a can of carburetor cleaner. So yeah, absolutely, I'm happy as heck that I bought this thing. I probably should have done it several years ago. It is a very, very cool piece. I am definitely glad that I bought it. But follow those little tips that I gave you, and it'll help you kind of get the most out of it. And do your homework, figure out exactly what size parts you're going to need to be cleaning. And if you think you need a 10 liter, buy the 15, buy the 20. Trust me, you'll want a bigger, cleaner as soon as you figure out you get it home and you realize how good it works. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate. Please leave them down below. I'd love to answer them for you. If you got something out of the video, thought it was cool, please leave me a thumbs up. I certainly do appreciate that as well. And we'll catch you on the next video.